Welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm Marlene Harris. As many of you know, February is Black History Month. It's a time that's been set aside for this nation to reflect on the history, triumphs, and contributions of African Americans. And I plan to devote each Talk of the Town show during the month of February to the topic of Black history. Tonight, I'm really excited and thrilled to have on the show one of the finest African American poets in this country, Nikki Giovanni. Since the publication of her first book, Black Feelings, Black Talk, in 1968, Ms. Giovanni's published 17 books of poetry and nonfiction. She's received many honorary degrees and has taught at several major universities and is currently a professor of English at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. Welcome to the show. When I've had conversations with people this week and I've let them know that you were going to be a guest on the show, it seems that in many ways you're an inspiration to people, and you're also sort of a spokesperson for the feelings of Black people.
Oh, that's very nice, but that doesn't go contrary to being a poet. I mean, actually poetry is probably the bottom line for anything when you think about it. You know, that's Michael Jordan is poetry in motion. And Julia Child is a poetry as a chef. You know, poetry tends to be a bottom line. So I think it's kind of nice, and I appreciate it. I hope people like my poetry. But to be a poet is more than to write poems. It is a point of view. You know.
When somebody asks you, what do you do? What do you say first? I'm an educator first. I'm a poet first. Or
I once did an interview with Peter Bailey for Ebony magazine, and he said, describe yourself, and I said, I'm Black, female, and polite. And being an educator, those are jobs. I've never been hung up on jobs. I don't recommend it. I've been talking to kids today, you know, or during my visit to Miami. I think that people make too much out of jobs. And if you think about the history of Black Americans, at the point that we were 100% employed, we were also 100% not being paid for it.
That's the
truth. It's called slavery. And so you say, you know, I wouldn't define myself in terms of what I do for a living, because if you do that, then if it gets taken away, you have these, you know, sort of crises about who you are and am I really a good person and all of that. I'm a poet because I think a certain way, and I try to look at the world a certain way. And mostly I think of myself as a citizen of planet Earth.
You know, I think that's been a shift in thinking in the Black community, to start thinking of yourself as your job. I know in certain sectors, in certain parts of the American culture, people have always thought of themselves in that way. But it seems that African Americans, before we were allowed to have good jobs, so to speak, we never really defined ourselves that way, but now we do.
Well, you know, I think the professions have always defined themselves. And going back to Dr. Du Bois or to Dr. Alain Locke, people who had earned PhDs thought of themselves, you know, in terms of the professions. Mm-hmm. But we're also having middle management, which thinks of itself in terms of its job. It's very dangerous when you look at the number of layoffs that are occurring, or I think they call it buyouts, but it's the same thing. They're eliminating people in their jobs. So I think it's good to earn a living, but I also think it's good to recognize that there is no commitment. American industry is not very kind. Well, it's not kind at all. And they just as soon eliminate your job as not. There's no commitment to human beings in American industry. There's a commitment to top management and the bottom line.
You know, I hear professors speaking about this here at Miami University. They say this type of thinking is, I don't know if it's more prevalent in the younger generation, but it's definitely evident there. You find many kids now, they come to school and they're just coming to school just to get a job. I mean, that's their thinking from the day they come in. They're no longer coming in to get an education or to become a more enlightened person. They're coming to be trained for a job.
Yeah, which is really pitiful, but that's the result of the Reagan-Bush years. And we've got a generation, I think it's probably fair to say we've lost close to a generation of Black men to prison for stupid charges that should not be. But we've also lost a generation of white men to the prison of thinking that they are part of the ruling class and that they should participate, that they do things like come into colleges like Miami or any other and say, well, I went to college, I should get a better job. That's ridiculous. Jobs and education have very little to do with each other. I mean, you have to be able to read and write and things like that. But we are educated and we hope, civilized for the intrinsic value, not for the is there such a word, extrinsic? Not for the external value that is artificially, if I may, ascribed to us.
What else do you tell the younger generation when you speak to them, like when you give the speech at Miami, and I know you talk to students at colleges across the country and through magazine articles? What else do you say to them?
I like the kids. One, I think that somebody needs to remind them that there's nothing, particularly wrong with them. Everybody tries to make you think, well, I'm not whatever. I'm not black enough. I'm not male enough. I'm not, I don't know. I mean, all these crises going on, and I think somebody needs to remind the kids that, and I'm saying the kids, I mean young people like you even, that you're all right, that we are counting on you to carry us into the future, and you will do that, that your generation, this generation, is the first, not actually yours, but the one just the decade right behind you, is the first to have to face on planet Earth the prospect and the concept of enough. And it's going to be kind of fascinating to watch it because we have enough. We know how to make enough food. We know how to make enough clothes, how to make enough shelter, as it were. We know how to inoculate against basic childhood diseases. What we don't have is any will to share it. So we have a differential between rich and poor that is unacceptably high because some people have hundreds of millions and some people have nothing. And this bodes ill for the United States. It bodes ill for, in fact, planet Earth. But human beings are the only mammal, the only warm-blooded being that will hunt an animal to extinction. And since we know that about ourselves, we know that we have to, in fact, find a way to input some controls because we will, in fact, either crush the poor, in which case that won't be good, or the poor will crush the rich, in which place that won't be good. It all gets to be uglier than it has to be when it's all about things like, can I have enough to eat? Can I have some place to lay my head? The answer is, of course, yes, you may. I mean, we can do that. We can build housing. We know how to do these things. We just don't like to do it because we like for people to envy us, to look up at us. We're wonderful. We have a new car. That's ridiculous,
I know you like to speak to young people in your poetry. As a matter of fact, there's been a re-release of a book you wrote especially for young people, Ego Tripping and Other Poems for Young People, after it was 20 years ago that you wrote that book. And also there's some new poems in there, I understand.
Yes, there are. My publisher asked me about it, and I thought it was a terrific idea. I've written 3 children's books, Spin a Soft Black Song, Ego Tripping and Other Poems for Young Readers, and Vacation Time. And this is the 20th anniversary of Ego Tripping. I did 10 new poems for it, which I really like. I did a poem for Langston Hughes, and I did a poem for a school teacher that I know. I did, like 10 new ones. And I really like what we were able to do with that. I like the book because I think the book recognizes that young people are intelligent. And so much of what passes for children's literature is just stupid. And you wonder, I'm not saying that don't misunderstand, I'm not saying I'm the only writer that writes as if children were intelligent. But so many people just assume that children are just not bright. And you can't give them dilemmas, you can't give them ethical questions. They won't be able to answer it. Well, of course they can. You have to treat children with respect. They're not little human beings, they're children. And like any other living being, though, they deserve respect. And I think when you treat them with respect, you get respect back, and they learn to expect it. I think that Ego Tripping is a very respectful book.
You really came to the fore, to the nation's attention in the late 60s and the early 70s, and some of your most well-known poems were from that era. How would you say your poetry today is different from the things you were writing back then? Or is there any difference?
Well, I'm still fascinated by human beings, and I always will be. And so you could take a poem that I think is very well-known, like Ego Tripping, and you could take a poem that's less well-known in my latest book of poetry, which is called Those Who Ride the Night Winds. Take a poem like Hands, and actually you can see that there's a thread. I'm totally fascinated by human beings. I think that we're interesting. We're not a very nice species. I mean, that's just understood. We're just not very nice. And there's really nothing to say that we're very smart, because if we were very smart, we would not have this pollution that we have, and we would not have the social problems that we have, not to mention the political corruption that we have.
So what's in the immediate future for Nikki Giovanni the next 5-10 years?
I'm hoping, of course, I will have another book out. I'm sort of thinking about it, but it's going to be another couple of years, because my son graduates in May. And
from
we're
where?
all Morehouse.
Oh.
And we're all kind of excited about that. And then with any luck, I'll get a leave from work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your being here. It's been an honor.
Oh, thank you.